For centuries, the belief was that Mount Sinai, the place where God gave Moses the Ten Commandments, was located in Egypt.
What if Mount Sinai isn't where we've always thought it was? New discoveries, a scorched peak, ancient carvings of golden calves, are pointing to a different location, one that challenges everything we've believed. Some claim this evidence has been hidden from the public, but why keep it secret? And who's behind the silence? It's time to explore a mountain that could rewrite history and reveal truths long buried. What we uncover may change how we see the past forever. A shift in location, from Sinai Peninsula to Arabia. For centuries, millions of pilgrims, scholars, and tourists have journeyed to one particular peak in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, believing it to be the very mountain where Moses met God, received the Ten Commandments, and witnessed fire, thunder, and divine glory. Monasteries have been built at its foot, tour guides have memorized its stories, and sacred traditions have been passed down in its shadow. But what if it's the wrong mountain? This idea may sound outrageous at first. After all, the traditional Mount Sinai is not just a dot on the map, it is woven into religious history. Yet as researchers began to revisit the actual words of Scripture, a quiet, unsettling question emerged. Have we been looking in the wrong place all along? The Bible tells us that when Moses fled Egypt, he didn't hide in the Sinai Peninsula. He went to a land called Midian. There, in exile, he started a new life. He married the daughter of Jethro, a Midianite priest, and spent years tending sheep. It wasn't until one ordinary day, while walking near Mount Horeb, that something extraordinary happened. A bush, burning with fire, yet not consumed, caught his eye. And from that flame came the voice of God. Now here's where things get interesting. Midian is not in Egypt. It never was. Midian lies in what we now call northwest Saudi Arabia. This small but crucial detail places Moses and his divine encounter far from the traditionally accepted Sinai Peninsula. It means the very beginning of the Mount Sinai story doesn't even happen in the region we've celebrated for centuries. So, if the Bible places Moses in Arabia, shouldn't we be looking there for Mount Sinai too? That's exactly what led a number of modern researchers to take a second look, not at tradition, but at the landscape itself. And in doing so, they discovered something remarkable. Jabal al-Lawz, an enormous, rugged mountain rising over 8,000 feet above the desert floor. Known locally as the Mountain of Almonds, it is not a place of tourism or pilgrimage. In fact, most people have never even heard of it. But Jabal al-Lawz sits precisely where ancient Midian would have been. Its location fits perfectly with the geography described in the book of Exodus, and that makes it a strong, if controversial, candidate for the true Mount Sinai. Unlike the celebrated peaks in Egypt, this mountain stands quiet, uncelebrated, and untouched by centuries of religious construction. It does not appear on souvenir mugs or stained glass windows. There are no crowds, no chapels, no well-worn paths. But maybe that's exactly the point. Its remote location in Arabia makes it harder to reach, but also harder to distort. It has remained wild and silent, just as the Bible describes the mountain when Moses first approached it. Some researchers have begun to wonder if this very silence has protected something precious. Of course, challenging a tradition that has stood for over 1,500 years is no small thing. Suggesting that Mount Sinai might be in Arabia, not Egypt, isn't just moving a landmark. It's shaking the foundation of centuries of belief, scholarship, and faith. But what if the evidence supports it? What if the ancient trail Moses walked led not west toward Egypt, but east toward Arabia? And if that's true, then Jabal al-Lawz may not just be a mountain. It may be a message, a quiet call to re-examine the text, to reconsider what we've accepted, and to be open to the idea that the truth of the Bible may have been hiding in plain sight, waiting for this generation to finally see it. You must be surprised to learn about the shift in location. But hold on, because we have many more astonishing details waiting for you. What comes next might just change everything you thought you knew. The scorched summit. Fire from heaven. At first glance, the mountains appear rugged, tall, and commanding, much like many others in the region. But then, your eyes reach the summit, and everything changes. At the very top of this mountain, the rock turns black. Not gray, not dark brown, but deep black, as though fire had kissed the summit and left behind a permanent scar. It is not just one part or an isolated patch. The entire upper section appears scorched. Yet as you move lower, the rock fades back into its natural granite color, untouched and unburned. It is this sharp contrast that has captured the attention of explorers, researchers, and believers alike. Why is this blackened summit so significant? Because it matches something described thousands of years ago in the book of Exodus. In chapter 19, verse 18, the Bible says, "Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently." It was not a symbolic vision. It was a physical event. The mountain shook, smoke rose, fire descended. And now, in our time, there stands a mountain whose summit still looks as if it burned under something far greater than the sun. What makes this all the more puzzling is that Jabal al-Lawz is not a volcano. There is no history of volcanic activity in the region. The rock itself is not volcanic in origin. It is granite, a material known for its strength, not for its flammability. There is no scientific explanation for why the top of this particular mountain is blackened, while the others around it remain their natural color. Researchers have ruled out lightning strikes as the cause. A strike might burn a tree or leave a streak, but it would not evenly blacken the surface of an entire mountaintop. There are no signs of fire from human activity either. No campsites, no burn piles, no modern explanation. It is as if the mountain was scorched from above by something powerful, sudden, and unrepeatable. This has led many to ask, could we be looking at the very mountain where the presence of God descended in fire? Could this blackened peak be the physical echo of that ancient moment when heaven touched earth and the Israelites stood trembling below? The idea is not as far-fetched as it sounds. The Bible describes a mountain physically affected by divine presence. And now there stands a mountain with the very marks that Scripture predicted. It does not require imagination to see the connection. It requires only open eyes. Standing at the base of Jabal al-Lawz and looking up, one cannot help but feel something deeper stirring. The blackened summit tells a silent story, one of fear and awe, one of fire and smoke, one of a people standing at the edge of something sacred, watching the sky burn above them. In a world where faith and science often seem at odds, Jabal al-Lawz invites both into conversation. Its summit challenges what we think is possible. It whispers of a moment when something beyond natural law left its mark. And perhaps that mark still stands today, not just as evidence of an event, but as a reminder of a presence too powerful to be forgotten. Now, let's take you to the most miraculous part of the mountain, the place where something truly unbelievable is said to have happened. The split rock, water from a miraculous source. Deep in the arid wilderness of northwest Saudi Arabia, near the base of Jabal al-Lawz, stands a formation that defies the expectations of its harsh desert surroundings. It is not hidden under sand or lost to time. In fact, it rises boldly into view. Towering over 60 feet tall, this massive granite monolith is split straight down the middle. God told Moses to take his staff, the same one that had parted the Red Sea, and strike the rock at Horeb. And when he did, water poured out. Enough not just for a few people, but for an entire nation traveling with families, livestock, and possessions. It was not just a drink. It was survival. It was a miracle. And it happened, according to the Bible, right there in the wilderness. Now imagine standing before this towering split granite rock near Jabal al-Lawz. The desert stretches endlessly in every direction. The air is dry. the ground cracked and lifeless. But there, at the base of the rock, something strange begins to appear. Smooth channels in the stone, rounded edges on the hard granite surface, signs that water, an enormous amount of it, once rushed through this very place. This is not the kind of erosion you'd expect in an area that receives barely any rainfall throughout the year. In fact, this region is one of the driest places on Earth, and yet the base of this split rock shows clear evidence of heavy water flow. Researchers have documented water-polished surfaces, deep runoff grooves, and a wash basin that appears carved not by tools, but by time and a rushing stream. What makes this site so unique is not just that it matches the biblical description in general. It aligns with it in detail. The location is right. The split is clean. The rock is enormous, standing far above any person. And the water erosion is not symbolic. It is physical, carved into the earth, visible even to the untrained eye. The rock itself seems to speak, not with words, but with scars. Scars that whisper of a moment where natural laws bowed to divine command, where something eternal broke through into the physical world and left behind a mark no sandstorm could erase. For those who visit, the impact is often emotional. Some describe a strange stillness in the air, as if the desert holds its breath around the stone. Others say it feels like standing on sacred ground. You do not need to be a geologist or a theologian to feel that this place is different. Critics argue that rocks can split naturally, and that erosion can happen from rare floods or wind over time. But the isolation of this formation, the precision of the split, and the undeniable water evidence in a region that should be bone dry, it raises questions that science has yet to fully answer. If this rock is truly the one described in Exodus, it is not just a historic artifact. It is a monument to mercy. It is a reminder that when people were desperate and angry, God provided, not with conditions or speeches, but with water, pure, abundant, life-saving. And now, perhaps for the first time in centuries, that same rock stands revealed to the world again, not buried in legend, but rising from the desert floor, inviting a new generation to remember what once flowed from its heart. But beyond its miraculous nature and surprising appearance, this stone and the surrounding area hold deep ritualistic importance. Let's take a closer look at what was built and left behind. Rituals enshrined in stone. Scattered across the rugged terrain is a stone structure that many researchers believe to be an ancient altar. This altar is not a random pile of stones, nor is it a natural formation. It is deliberate, structured, built. Its foundation is wide and flat, giving the appearance of a platform where sacrifices or ceremonies may have once taken place. But what truly captures attention are the carvings that flank the stones nearby, figures of bulls and calves etched into the rock. They are primitive, yet clear. The horns curve upward. The bodies are unmistakably bovine. In any other context, these images might simply reflect common livestock. But here, they hold a much deeper meaning. These carvings bring to life one of the most infamous episodes in the history of the Israelites, the golden calf incident described in Exodus 32. When Moses went up Mount Sinai to meet with God and receive the commandments, the people grew impatient. In his absence, they convinced Aaron to melt down their gold and fashion a calf, an idol they could worship. It was a moment of great failure. A people who had just been delivered from slavery turned to pagan ritual in the very shadow of the holy mountain. To see images of calves and bulls carved into stone at the base of Jabal al-Lawz evokes this story with eerie precision. They are not decorative, they carry weight. These carvings suggest that something ritualistic took place here, something that closely mirrors the actions described in the Bible. Not far from the altar site, another set of stones stands in silent formation. 12 upright pillars. These are not scattered or tumbled. They are placed with intention, upright, and arranged in a way that suggests meaning. Their number is not random either. In Exodus 24 verse 4, we read that Moses built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars, each representing one of the 12 tribes of Israel. It was part of the covenant ceremony, a moment of unity and solemn promise between God and His people. Seeing 12 standing stones near what may be an altar in the land of ancient Midian is more than a coincidence. It raises the question, are we looking at the physical remains of the very covenant Moses performed thousands of years ago? Could this be the place where the people of Israel stood, heard the words of the covenant, and committed themselves as a nation to follow the law of God? The alignment of these features, the altar, the carved images, the pillars, suggests that the area was used for organized worship and possibly for rituals directly connected to the biblical narrative. It speaks of a community, not just passing through, but gathering, offering, and participating in religious acts. These stones do not speak in words, but they tell a story nonetheless, a story of people caught between faith and fear, a story of a sacred agreement, a story of failure, repentance, and divine instruction. In this silent desert landscape, where wind whistles between rocks and the sun casts long shadows, the arrangement of these stones remains. They are not modern markers. They are ancient witnesses. They have no signs or plaques to explain them, but their shape, number, and carvings point to rituals that shape the destiny of a nation. The signs of something sacred don't end with altars and pillars. Surrounding the mountain itself are markers of restriction. Let's explore the stone boundaries that once set apart the very ground where heaven met earth. Sacred perimeter and ritual boundaries in stone. As one walks the rocky base of Jabal al-Lawz, past the altar, past the carvings of calves, and beyond the standing pillars, another quiet yet powerful feature comes into view. Lining parts of the mountain's perimeter are rows of stones, simple, weathered, and unadorned. They do not tower like monuments or shimmer with ancient symbols, yet their presence carries deep meaning. These rows of stone markers are believed to represent something sacred, something that speaks of divine boundaries. In the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 12, God instructs Moses to set limits around Mount Sinai. The people were told not to approach, not to touch the mountain. It had become holy, set apart by the presence of God. Anyone who crossed the boundary without permission would be put to death. It was not a symbolic warning, it was a physical command. The mountain had become the very place where heaven came down, and its holiness demanded respect. Now, standing before Jabal al-Lawz, these stone markers appear to echo that ancient instruction. They do not form a wall or a fence. Instead, they stretch in a loose but deliberate pattern, as if to say, this far and no farther. Their simplicity is striking. No words, no images, just stones placed to define a sacred threshold. Their location near the mountain's foot aligns perfectly with the biblical directive. They do not surround the entire mountain, but appear in key places, enough to suggest that someone in the distant past took the command seriously. Someone marked the line. Someone wanted to make it clear that what lay beyond was not ordinary ground. What makes this even more compelling is the absence of such boundaries in other ancient sites. Many cultures built walls, gates, or temples, but rarely do we see rows of individual stones set in place to mark holiness rather than to defend territory. This pattern reflects a mindset of reverence rather than protection. It suggests that the people who arranged them were not trying to keep enemies out, but were warning their own community to stay back in awe and respect. In a desert landscape where wind and time erase most human efforts, the survival of these markers is remarkable. They may not appear grand at first glance, but they represent something far greater than their size. They speak of an encounter so intense that even the ground had to be marked, an event so powerful that boundaries had to be set, not for order, but for reverence. The Bible's account of Mount Sinai is not just about fire and smoke. It is about holiness, about a God who is close, yet not to be approached carelessly. These stones remain a reminder of that tension, that sacred balance between access and awe, between invitation and warning. While the stones still speak of holiness and awe, access to this mountain tells a different story, one of fences, secrecy, and tight government control. Restricted access and secrecy and government control. For a mountain that many people around the world believe could be the true Mount Sinai, Jabal al-Lawz is unusually quiet. Not in sound, but in visibility. It is not featured in travel brochures. It is not open to exploration. You will not find tour buses heading there. Instead, this mountain in northwest Saudi Arabia is surrounded by fences, security, and an atmosphere of silence that only deepens the mystery. Jabal al-Lawz is not like other mountains. It is guarded. The area around it is reportedly patrolled by the Saudi military. Signs warn visitors to stay away. Those who have attempted to document the site often describe facing serious consequences. Several explorers and researchers claim to have been detained after trying to take photos or collect samples. Some have had their cameras confiscated. Others report having their visas revoked after showing interest in the mountain's features. This is not normal behavior for a desert mountain, especially one that supposedly has no known military or strategic importance. Saudi Arabia has many vast desert areas open to the public. Tourists are welcomed to explore ancient sites and natural wonders across the kingdom. But for reasons left unexplained, Jabal al-Lawz remains tightly restricted. If you try to get too close, you will be stopped. The secrecy does not end on the ground. It stretches into the digital realm as well. Satellite images of the mountain show something unusual. While much of Saudi Arabia can be viewed in high detail through mapping services, the area around Jabal al-Lawz appears different. In several instances, the image quality is noticeably reduced. Some spots appear blurred. Others seem artificially downgraded, offering less clarity than surrounding regions. These differences have led many to ask a simple but powerful question. Why? Why would a seemingly unremarkable mountain be protected so intensely? Why would military patrols guard an area with no known government or commercial interests? Why would satellite images of this mountain be lower in quality compared to nearby areas? Why such effort to keep people away? The answers are not given. No official explanation has been provided by Saudi authorities regarding the restrictions, but the silence itself speaks volumes. It suggests that someone believes this place holds more than meets the eye. Some say the restrictions are meant to preserve the site from damage. Others suggest the Saudi government may be aware of the mountain's possible biblical connection and prefers to keep the controversy contained. Still others believe that the secrecy exists to prevent any challenge to widely accepted narratives tied to the traditional Mount Sinai in Egypt. Whatever the reason, the result is clear. Jabal al-Lawz is not accessible. It is not available for public exploration or open research. It remains fenced, watched, and under control. This situation raises a larger issue. When places of historical or spiritual interest are hidden or restricted, what truths remain locked away with them? The mountain may be silent, but the questions it raises are loud. If Jabal al-Lawz is not significant, why protect it so fiercely? And if it is, what does that mean for everything we thought we knew? What historians say about Mount Sinai, is it the same as the Bible describes? For centuries, tradition has placed the biblical Mount Sinai in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, specifically at a site known as Jabal Musa. This location has long been accepted by both religious pilgrims and historians, in part because of early Christian traditions and the presence of ancient religious landmarks such as St. Catherine's Monastery. However, as the search for historical accuracy continues, some historians are beginning to question whether this traditional site truly matches the biblical description. According to proponents of this theory, the geography around Jabal al-Lawz aligns far more closely with the biblical narrative. The idea has gained attention outside mainstream scholarship, with institutions such as the Base Institute and independent researchers arguing that this mountain matches the text both in description and in location. Despite growing interest, most mainstream historians and biblical scholars remain cautious. The majority still favor the traditional Sinai Peninsula site, pointing out that Jabal al-Lawz has not been subjected to formal archaeological excavations or peer-reviewed study. Critics like Dr. James Hoffmeyer and Gordon Franz argue that claims made about Jabal al-Lawz rely too heavily on anecdotal evidence and speculation rather than on solid archaeological findings. They also highlight the lack of inscriptions, dated artifacts, or settlement remains that could confidently place the Israelites at the Saudi Arabian site. Satellite images and on-site photos of Jabal al-Lawz show impressive formations, including a blackened summit, split rock, altars, and stone pillars, features some say support the biblical account. However, scholars stress that without verifiable dating or cultural context, these features remain ambiguous. For instance, the carvings of calves and bulls near what appears to be an altar could be interpreted in many ways and are not definitive proof of Israelite worship practices. Importantly, many historians agree on one thing: there is still no definitive archaeological evidence for the true location of Mount Sinai. As noted by biblical archaeologist Eric Klein, the only way to confirm such a site would be through inscriptions or artifacts directly linked to the Israelites and dated to the appropriate time period. Until such discoveries are made, both the traditional site in Egypt and the alternative site in Saudi Arabia remain open to interpretation. While the debate over Mount Sinai's true location continues, its potential discovery is already shaking foundations. Let's explore the broader impact, the disruption it brings, and the deeper revelations it may hold. The broader impact, disruption, and revelation. If the growing claims about Jabal al-Lawz are even partly true, the implications reach far beyond the rocky hills of northwest Saudi Arabia. Identifying this mountain as the real Mount Sinai does more than relocate a biblical landmark. It shakes the pillars of tradition, faith, and even international tourism. For centuries, the accepted location of Mount Sinai has been in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. This belief has become so deeply entrenched that it no longer feels like an interpretation. It feels like fact. Entire industries have grown around this idea. Pilgrims visit the famous St. Catherine's Monastery. Tour groups climb what they are told is the sacred mountain. Religious literature, devotional art, and educational material across the Christian and Jewish worlds reinforce this specific image of Sinai. To suggest that the true mountain lies elsewhere, particularly in Saudi Arabia, is not just inconvenient, it is disruptive. Egypt, for example, has benefited from being home to what many believe is one of the most sacred places in biblical history. Religious tourism brings not only spiritual reverence but economic gain. If Jabal al-Lawz were to gain widespread recognition as the true Mount Sinai, it could significantly shift the flow of pilgrims and attention. It would be more than a theological debate. It would be an economic one too. At the same time, Saudi Arabia's recent moves toward greater openness make this discussion even more complicated. In the past, religious sites and archaeological digs were tightly controlled or outright forbidden in many areas of the kingdom. But today, the Saudi government is increasingly investing in tourism, cultural heritage, and historical research. If the kingdom were to officially explore or even promote Jabal al-Lawz as the possible site of Mount Sinai, it could reshape religious geography in a dramatic way. However, it is not only governments and economies that would feel the impact. Theological institutions, seminaries, and scholars who have long supported the traditional Sinai location would face an unsettling question. What if we were wrong? Accepting Jabal al-Lawz would mean revisiting centuries of teaching, maps, and research. For some, this possibility is exciting, a chance to align faith more closely with the physical world. For others, it threatens to undo a carefully constructed understanding of sacred history. The very idea of Jabal al-Lawz as Mount Sinai has often been dismissed as fringe or sensational. And yet, the evidence continues to draw attention. The blackened summit, the split rock, the stone altar with calf carvings, the 12 standing pillars. All of these features seem to match the biblical account more closely than the traditional site ever has. Whether this alignment is coincidental or divinely revealed is up for debate. But the conversation is growing. This conversation forces us to ask important questions. Should tradition always outweigh discovery? Can centuries of belief be corrected by new physical evidence? And perhaps most importantly, does it matter where the mountain is if the message of the mountain remains the same? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. The potential identification of Jabal al-Lawz invites believers, historians, and spiritual seekers to re-examine what they know or think they know about one of the most sacred stories in history. It merges archaeology with theology. It bridges faith with physical evidence. It challenges everyone to look again at the Exodus narrative, not as myth or tradition, but as something that might have left real, tangible marks on the earth. What are your thoughts on these astonishing pieces of evidence surrounding Mount Sinai? Share your thoughts in the comments.